Welcome back to Joe's Style of Boxing. If you've watched this channel before, you'll know that I like the history of boxing. I like to occasionally delve into it. So I thought I'd do something a little bit different today. Now, you may have heard of a group of fighters that went under the banner of Murderers Row. Now, these were a bunch of black fighters who, and as we know, there was a ton of racism, for most of the 20th century, certainly the first half of it. These guys were denied the chance to win titles, to win world titles, even though they more than earned the right to do so. And they fought each other as a result just to earn a living. And, there were also the coloured titles, which were probably as legitimate as the official world titles. But this bunch of fighters were quite extraordinary, really. I'm talking about the period late 30s to mid 40s, maybe a little bit later in the case of one of the fighters, Burt Lytell. But we'll get to these. I'll go through who they were first of all. Okay, so there is some conjecture as to who exactly fits in with this Murderers Row crew. Okay. Now, there were five, essentially, that are mentioned. Charlie Burley, who was probably the most well-known and the most revered of them, very, very highly thought of. He had 83 wins. By the way, I'm going to go by BoxRec records, so that if you want to go and have a look at these fighters, just go to BoxRec. A lot of the old-timer records are probably incomplete. Probably they've got a few mistakes, but just for the sake of argument, we'll use BoxRec. Okay, so Charlie Burley had 83 wins with 50 KOs, 12 defeats. He was never stopped, and 2 draws. Burt Lytell, who was probably the baby of the bunch, he turned pro later than the others. He had 73 wins with 24 KOs, 23 defeats, and he was only stopped once, and 7 draws. Another name we need to mention is Jack Chase, who had 81 wins with 35 KOs, 24 defeats with 3 KOs, 3 stoppages, and 12 draws. Lloyd Marshall, who had 71 wins with 36 KOs, 25 defeats. He was stopped 11 times and 4 draws. And then Eddie Booker, who had 68 wins with 34 stoppages or KOs, 5 defeats. He was never stopped, and he had 8 draws as well. And before anyone asks, yes, I did look this up on BoxRec. I'm not doing this from memory. Grey matter is not that powerful. So I looked this up prior to, to doing this video. However, there were 2 other fighters who deserve a mention and are often thought of as Murderers Row fighters. I think they are myself. Again, it's kind of like, who are the Jack the Ripper victims? Is it the canonical 5, or was one of them killed by someone else? Or people they can never really work out which one were Ripper victims and which one weren't. It's the same with the Murderers Row lot. The other 2 fighters who had astounding records, okay, that you will barely believe. One of them was called Coco Kid, and he had 179 wins with 48 KOs, 58 defeats with 7 stoppages, and 11 draws. Then there's Holman Williams. I would say Holman Williams, without a shadow of a doubt, is a Murderers Row fighter. He had 146 wins, so he was slacking, 36 KOs, 31 defeats, but he was only stopped 3 times, and 11 draws. So between them, they had something along the lines of, the figure I came to is 939 fights between these 7 fighters. And of those 939 fights, only 25 were stoppage defeats. That's the combined record. And it's who they fought as well, because not only do they fight each other, they fought other big names, which I'm going to mention. One of which is arguably the greatest light heavyweight of all time, which is Archie Moore. I mean, Archie Moore, part of his greatness is that he fought all the Murderers Row fighters and won some and lost some. But anyway, so, those figures are going to, without even going into the records at the moment, I'll get to that in a moment, but those figures will blow your mind. Because, of course, having 4 fights a year in this day and age is considered to be incredible. Well, he's really busy. Well, Jack Chase, in his first year as a professional, which was 1936, had 24 fights. Okay. And he was only a teenager, I think, at the time. Charlie Burley, like I said before, Charlie Burley is probably the most revered of the Murderers Row fighters. And he turned professional rather than fight at the 1936 Olympics. I think he did qualify for the 36 Olympics, but he didn't like the Nazi regime. He recognised them as being racist, and he said, sod that, I'm going to turn pro, which he did. He beat if it's not the best example of how good Charlie Burley was, it must be close to it. Because in 1944, at the age of 28, in his 73rd fight, he fought Archie Moore, Charlie Burley did. And Archie Moore was 29, so he was a year older, and that was his 74th fight. And bear in mind, Burley was much smaller than Archie Moore. Burley was a welterweight and then became a middleweight. That's what a lot of the Murderers Row fighters were. They started as welterweights. Some of them were even lighter because they began their careers when they were very, very young. But welterweight, middleweight, we're talking here. Smaller than Archie Moore, anyway. And Burley knocked Moore down 4 times and beat him. And, Moore was like I say, 29 years old. He's at his peak, and he's one of the greatest fighters ever. Ancient Archie. I mean, he went on till he fought Muhammad Ali, in the 60s. And he was 52, I think, at the time. Ali stopped him in 4 rounds. But for Burley to do that to Archie Moore, that was pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. He also beat Coco Kid, he of the 179 wins and what did I say? 179 wins and Coco Kid 58 defeats, was it? He beat him. He beat. Now, hang on a minute. Now, so Charlie Burley beat Coco Kid for the coloured welterweight title, and which again was kind of. I mean, Henry Armstrong at some point was he the regular, the universally recognised welterweight champ at the time? I can't remember offhand, but anyway, Burley beat Coco Kid for the coloured welterweight title, and he also beat around about the same time he beat Fritzy Zivic and Billy Sues. I think he fought Zivic 2 or 3 times because he lost one of them. And he also went 3-1 against Holman Williams, who was another Murderers Row fighter, an excellent fighter. And he also beat Jack Chase, who was a Murderers Row fighter, and also a very good fighter called Aaron Wade, who some people also include him in the Murderers Row. I don't know. Again, we're debating who fits into this little elite crew. Now, of the 12 losses that Charlie Burley suffered, 5 were against fellow Murderers Row fighters, which shows you how good this crew of people were, this crew of fighters. They were fighting each other all the time and, crossing over. But for Burley, to beat Burley was something in itself. But when you consider his 12 losses, and he was never stopped, 5 were against fellow Murderers Row fighters. Having said that, it is very difficult for us to truly know how good he was. And you know why? Because there's only a few minutes of footage of him in his later career when he fought Oakland Billy Smith. That was in 1946. That's the only footage we've got of him. But the reason I'm dwelling on Charlie Burley is because this might have been the first time I'd ever heard of him. When I was very young, I watched an interview with Eddie Futch, who was one of the greatest trainers of all time, and he said Charlie Burley was the most complete fighter he'd ever seen. And when he was asked, was he greater than Ray Robinson, he said yes. Okay, so Burley was highly thought of, and it's such a tragedy that we haven't got footage of him fighting, because all we can do is read the reports, and but his peers all hailed him as being a great fighter. Okay, so some of the others, let's take Coco Kid. Okay. Now, he turned pro 11 days after his 15th birthday. Okay, happy birthday! You're 15. Go and earn a living as a fighter. And he made his way through the ranks, and he was actually number 1 in the Ring magazine's welterweight rankings. okay? But he did not get a title shot against Henry Armstrong, okay? Armstrong picked people lower down, white fighters, because there was more money in it, okay? Because whatever. That's the way it was. Now, Fritzy Zivic eventually beat Armstrong for the welterweight title, not the coloured one, the universally recognised welterweight title, but he did not defend against Coco Kid. Coco Kid did not get a shot at the title, neither did Burley. But by the way, one other thing about Burley, Ray Robinson was meant to fight him. I think they did eventually fight, but Robinson doubled his asking price to fight Burley. He knew he was that good. His usual asking price said, no, I want double that. Anyway, getting back to Holman, who was I talking about? Holman Williams, wasn't it? Was I talking about Holman Williams? No, Coco Kid. I was talking about Coco Kid. But I'm talking to Holman Williams. Actually, Coco Kid and Holman Williams fought 13 times. 13 times. That's how often these fighters fought. And he won 8 of them, and there were 2 draws in there as well. Now, Coco Kid had a sad ending because he actually got pugilistic dementia. CTE, we call it now, don't we? And he carried on fighting. He fought for another 6 years after being diagnosed, and he had 50 fights. And eventually he died. Do you know how he died? He was homeless. And he just died. Just homeless guy, all those fights, died at 52. No kind of age, is it? And talking to Holman Williams, I mean, he had 6 fights with Charlie Burley and won 3 of them. So that shows you how good he was. And in 1945 alone, Holman Williams, he had wins over Burley, Bert Lytell, who was another very good Murderers Row fighter, Coco Kid, and Archie Moore. And Moore, I think, won the return, but he did beat him in 45. Now, the irony here, is it irony? Holman Williams had a very similar fate to Coco Kid because he ended up homeless as well. And he used to sleep in a gym, like a boxing club. He used to help out with the youngsters. And he slept there, and it burned down and killed him. And he died at the same age as Coco Kid, 52 years old. So a terrible end, really. But a lot of these fighters had very sad endings. Probably the unluckiest of the Murderers Row lot was Eddie Booker, because he had to retire at 26 because he had bad eyesight. I mean, really bad eyesight. Bad eye injuries. Literally the eyeball, and he was in danger of going blind. But he still got some incredible wins. Like he stopped Archie Moore in 8 rounds, and he defeated Holman Williams. And then another one was Lloyd Marshall. He was a Murderers Row fighter. He beat Charlie Burley, Ezard Charles, Jake LaMotta. I mean, these were the guys he was beating. Joey Maxim, he beat him. Jack Chase was another one. He beat Archie Moore, Lloyd Marshall. Aaron Wade was a good fighter. Jack Chase beat him. And then Bert Lytell, who was, like I said before, was the youngest guy, if you like, the one who, I think he turned pro later, but he's still classed as being a Murderers Row fighter. He went 6-1-1 against his fellow Murderers Row fighters, and he was also ranked by the ring as the number 1 middleweight. I can't remember, was it 1948, I think it was. But he didn't get a title shot because they never do they? It's all, So, look, it's a fascinating subject, I think, the Murderers Row thing. And there is a very good book, which I read years ago. It's in one of the boxes with all my other books, but I recommend it thoroughly. It's by a guy called Springs Toledo. That's the guy's name, Springs Toledo. And it's called Murderers Row: In Search of Boxing's Greatest Outcasts. And I thoroughly recommend that book if you can get hold of it. It's very, very good. I think it's still in print. But anyway, that's the Murderers Row lot for you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Go get that book, very good. Springs Toledo is the guy. You ain't going to forget that name in a hurry. Maybe you will. But Murderers Row: In Search of Boxing's Greatest Outcasts. Very good book. But I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video and you could hit the like button, that would be great. And also if you could subscribe to the channel, that would be fantastic too. Thank you very much for your time. Something a bit different today. I thought we'd do that. But thank you. I always appreciate your time. And you take care of yourselves. And bye for now.